Privet, W.M. Siegel here. I want to talk about the nature of the composition of the Russian government in the sense of, in comparison to our own. Um, this article I read recently by a fellow named Yarder Ostbo, and works for the Institute for Norwegian Defense. He's a professor and writes extensively on foreign policy and specifically Russia. And this was published on it's Taylor and Francis online, which is good. Um, Publishing outfit, they've been around for a very long time. A lot of academic and this kind of article, the sort of thing people should be reading if they're gonna be uh, voting with foreign policy in mind, because you got to understand this stuff. But specifically, it talks about how in Russian politics, intelligence has been fused with it. The reason behind this is that, well, it doesn't get too much into the reasoning behind it. It sees it sort of as an organic thing, but I think there's certainly sinister elements behind it. But essentially, when you're talking to a Russian diplomat, there's a 70% chance you're talking to someone who, in the 90s, was in the FSB or GRU. FSB being the intelligence agency, and then GRU, military intelligence. And in the 90s, this is after the fall of the Soviet Union, remember? So there was just this chaotic reorganization of things. The intelligence community made sure that they were insulated in some way, just because of the nature of the work they're doing. And frustration grew within that community, because in the 90s, there was a middle class developing somewhat, and the life that these people had lived before, there wasn't a place for it. And sort of like Lost Boys, they gather together and start getting elected as mayor in this city, mayor in that city. You look at the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of the guys that are in charge of Russia right now were mayors of little cities throughout Russia. And then their friend was in business in that city, right? Making nice deals. There was a period about a decade of just accumulating wealth between this syndicate, a criminal ex-intelligence officers syndicate that has essentially taken control of Russia because of a fear that, well, they probably always wanted to control it, but in the 90s it seemed like maybe that wouldn't be possible because the Russian people were becoming less subservient because they were no longer under communism. And that means that whoever's in charge and whoever's preying on vulnerable was losing their grasp on something. And so when we deal with the Russian government right now, we're not dealing with the Russian people. There's nothing representative about it. But their president, Putin, ex-KGB, we all know that. There's photos of him standing next to Reagan. It's kind of sketchy. All of these people. And so when we discuss things with them, we're being scrutinized in a manner that Witkoff, that Rubio, they're not aware of it. They're not doing the same thing because these people don't have that experience, right? So we're sending in people who have zero experience in intelligence gathering or reading a person. Doing real estate deals isn't human. It's not, you can't equate that sort of thing. But on that note, they're doing the same in business. So it's like the people in charge of the heads of business, of politics, of all these things in the private sector in Russia are former and current on some loose leash uh, intelligence operatives. It is all I mean, you just have to Google the person, and you just look at their career. It's not it's not hard to understand it, but we're not dealing with that country the way they're dealing with us. Um, they don't want what we think they want. They don't. We're sending all the wrong people. We're sending our JV team um, that has no experience in intelligence in general, but then also the way that Russia does intelligence. Another thing that they were famous for during the Cold War was the way that they did intelligence operations in foreign places. Um, Russia has a tendency to find a cause that exists in a nation that they have interests, and if that cause is disruptive, they'll support it. Um, but there's no integrity. There's no guiding force there. An example of this is they invaded Ukraine under the supposition that there's neo-Nazis there. There's neo-Nazis that are threatening the Russians that live in Ukraine. And Ukraine is Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. Okay, and then in Hungary, they openly supported financially a publication that was neo-Nazi. Because in Hungary, they also have interests, and they want that government disrupted. And the way to do that in Hungary was to support the neo-Nazis. The way to do it in Ukraine was to call people neo-Nazis. Now, it's never the Russian nation doing these things, so they never look like they're saying one thing and doing another. They are so far removed when they support insurgencies that you can't follow the breadcrumbs. It never leads back to Russia, which is good for them in a sense, but it also means that you have less control over the fires you've set, which I think becomes obvious. Wherever Russia is, ends up a shit show because they never go there to fix anything. They're going there to massage and move other people to do their bidding, in the hopes that it simply makes more money for the syndicate. At least during the Soviet Union, you could lie and say that they were trying to do something, but now none of that exists anymore. So they're going to say whatever they want. They're going to call people Nazis, and then they're going to financially support Nazis in another country, the neighboring country. They're going to do this all day, every day. And we're sending in people that have no understanding of this. And they said recently in the news, Wykov is unknowingly falling into Russian narrative. Zelensky accused of this. Of course he is. That is the truth. That's 100% the truth. These idiots like Laura Loomer, all of these people are being handled by Russian intelligence officers, and they don't even know it because they are not ever researching these other things. They're not reading foreign policy papers written by scholars that have said, it's insane. These are not things that any of these people are reading. But you elect people that should be doing this sort of stuff. Real estate developers should not be in a room alone with 4 former Russian military intelligence officers. It just shouldn't happen, ever. It's such a liability, and we're just sending in the B squad. And it's not that any of these individual people are, I'm not saying you're not intelligent or you're not good at this or that. You're just the wrong person for the job, top down. You look at Russia's top tier of politics, every single one of them, every single one, military and intelligence, somewhere in there. That is not true for us. Not even close. And it's just it's a real problem when we elect people because we have a feeling about something. We say, yeah, that's the enemy. This, yeah, they might be the enemy. They've always been the enemy. But there's a time and a place for things, and uh, you have to have nuanced thought and layered thought to be able to say the right thing at the right time. Because they're playing a completely different game that we play. And we have to adjust the playbook. And we need experienced people and people who are really analyzing Russian motivation. And again, when I say Russia, it's got nothing to do with the Russian people. It is truly a criminal syndicate that has taken hold, and it took about 15 years of like I said, becoming a mayor here, and by being mayor, allowing this business to do this. And Russia does not have a very large population, so it was not difficult to achieve this. And if we look at it that way, if we look at the Russian people as people who need to be liberated from this syndicate, then we can change the way that we think about invasion or war. Because who are we fighting, really? We're not fighting the Russian people if we go to war with this Russian government. We're fighting to liberate the Russian people from a criminal syndicate that wrested control of the nation in the late 90s and early 2000s. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, had Western nations been allowed to sort of usher and shepherd things, even though it would have looked bad and everybody would have mistrusted everybody, some kind of international help could have prevented basically just the country being taken over by sad old spies. But that's what we're looking at, and it's all the information that these people are working with is coming to them indirectly or directly from Russian intelligence. All you have to do is push something 3 seconds to the left, I like to say. You know, you do a little different, and you can make another thing make sense. But that's not looking for truth. Trump will believe anything he's told. It's just that he's careful about who he listens to. There's no rhyme or reason behind it. It's just whoever he listens to, he has to feel that they like him. This is what we're working with now. So whoever this guy thinks is his friend, you need to start telling the truth. Because it's going to get really, really dangerous. And it sucks. Because we're sending in, we're sending fry cooks to talk to fucking ex-KGB. It's not good. This is not America's finest moment. But hopefully we can bring it back. So yell at your congressperson. Tell them to be smarter. Tell that you just have to start yelling at these people. You elected them. They work for you. It doesn't matter. Call them by their first name every day and tell them that we need to smarten up and we need new leadership, top down.